You know, they say the woods can be peaceful, a place to escape the chaos of everyday life, reconnect with nature, all that good stuff. But let me tell you, peaceful can turn creepy real fast. This happened about 6 years ago, back when I was 22. My cousin Sam and I were big on camping trips. We'd hit up different spots around Colorado whenever we had random days off. Sam was an Eagle Scout, total outdoors pro. Me, not so much. I was still learning the ropes, but I loved tagging along for the adventure. One week, we decided to camp in this place called Gunnison Forest. Sam had been there before. I hadn't. We planned it for the middle of the week to avoid crowds, figured it'd be quieter. Turns out, quiet isn't always a good thing. We parked near a picnic area and hiked about 15 minutes into the woods to find a decent spot. Sam, being the pro, found a perfect clearing, big enough for our 2 tents, a portable stove, and a campfire. He set his tent up in like 5 minutes. Me, I fumbled around for at least 20, but hey, I got it done. Once the tents were up, we made a fire ring out of rocks, grabbed some wood, and got the fire going. Sam always brought fire starters, so we kind of cheated, but who cares? The sun was setting and Sam started grilling steaks and burgers. The guy didn't mess around with food on these trips. He's a fantastic cook. Meanwhile, I just sat back and cracked open a beer. Camping vibes, right? After dinner, we chilled around the fire, playing cards and listening to classic rock. Everything felt perfect, until it didn't. That's when we heard it. Out in the woods, past the tree line, there was this humming sound. Low, kind of melodic, definitely not an animal. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate. I paused the music and we both sat there, straining to hear. I scrambled to grab the flashlight while Sam just stared into the darkness. By the time I clicked it on, the sounds had faded. Sam shrugged it off, but I could tell it bothered him. He said, "It's pretty unusual for anyone to be out here, especially alone." Humming? Walking toward a campsite with an active fire? Weird. We tried to shake it off and went back to playing cards. We even laughed a little about how our minds were probably just overreacting. But then, out of nowhere, a stick came flying into the campsite. And this wasn't a little twig. It was a big stick, the kind you'd have to throw with intention. Sam stood up immediately and yelled, "Whoever's out there messing with us, just off." The footsteps started again, but this time they were moving away. It didn't make us feel any better. I suggested we pack up and leave, but Sam shook his head. "Not in the dark," he said. "That's how you get lost out here." He handed me a can of bear spray and told me to keep it by my tent. The night felt wrong. Every little sound had me jumping. Branches cracking, leaves rustling. It all felt too deliberate. Sam offered to take the first watch, so I crawled into my tent, but I couldn't relax. At some point, I drifted off. Then I woke up, groggy, cold, and disoriented. I looked up and saw a head peering into my tent. At first, I thought it was Sam. The shape of the head, the outline, it looked like him. "Sam?" I mumbled, still half asleep. "Is it my turn?" No response. The figure didn't move. It just stared. And then, just as my brain started to fully wake up, the zipper of my tent suddenly zipped closed. The head was gone. Panic set in. I scrambled out of my sleeping bag, unzipped the tent, and stepped out. The campsite was dead silent. The fire was out. Sam wasn't there. I ran to his tent and unzipped it. He was inside, fast asleep, snoring like nothing was wrong. I shook him awake, whispering, "Sam, someone's here." He blinked at me, groggy, then sat up. "What?" I explained what happened. Sam grabbed his bear spray and said, "I must have nodded off while reading." He suggested I sleep in his tent for the rest of the night. No argument there. I grabbed my sleeping bag and headed back outside. That's when we heard it again, the humming, low, eerie, coming from somewhere deep in the woods. Sam whispered, "Hurry up." We zipped ourselves into his tent, bear spray in hand, and waited. Every little sound felt like a warning. I barely slept. Sam eventually nodded off again, but I stayed awake, heart racing, until the first light of dawn. When the sun came up, we packed up in record time and hiked back to the car. Neither of us said much. What was there to say? We both knew we'd experienced something off. We could have driven to another campsite, but honestly, no thanks. Sam's asked me to go camping a few times since then, but I've always said no. I'm good, man. I've realized that the scariest thing in the woods isn't bears or mountain lions. It's people. When my buddies and I rented a beach house in Florida, I didn't think anything weird was going to happen, but man, was I wrong. It was the four of us, Nick, Jesse, Tyler, and me, all packed into this tiny car for the drive down. The house was right on the beach. It was on this road where the bay was in front of the houses on one side, and on the other side, their backyards opened right up to the ocean. Some of the houses were massive, but ours was more low key. It wasn't fancy, but it had 4 bedrooms, which was perfect, one for each of us. The area felt super private. The houses were spread out, and the whole time we were unloading the car, not a single car passed by on the road. Inside, the house was clean and simple, with a heavy beach theme going on, seashell decorations, framed photos of waves, even a surfboard in the corner of the living room. The best part, though, was the view. The back deck opened up right onto the sand, just a couple of steps down, and there it was, the ocean. We picked our bedrooms, and I lucked out, snagging one with a beach view. First thing we did was head outside. We spent hours on the beach, swimming, tossing a football around, and just relaxing. The beach was practically empty except for this older couple way down the shore. Later, we grabbed dinner in town and hit a few bars. By the time we got back to the house, it was dark. Being a little buzzed and in good spirits, we decided to play some late-night football on the beach. While chasing the ball after a missed catch, I noticed something out in the water. The moonlight reflected off the waves, making it visible. At first, I wasn't sure what I was seeing, so I stopped and said, "What the hell is that?" Everyone looked over and spotted it too, a person standing waist-deep in the water. It was weird, but we figured maybe it was just a local going for a midnight swim. A little strange, sure, but not creepy, yet. We moved back to the deck, cracked open some beers, and chilled for a while. One by one, everyone started heading to bed, until it was just Jesse and me left outside. I kept glancing toward the water, curious if that person was still out there. Eventually, I spotted someone again, but this time they were on the beach, just standing there. They weren't moving, just facing us. Jesse noticed too and muttered, "That's weird." I thought maybe it was a neighbor, but they just stood there, not saying anything. Finally, I shouted, "Hey, you okay?" Jesse groaned. "Why would you do that?" I didn't know what I was expecting, but they didn't respond. They just stood there. It was so unsettling that we decided to head inside. Nick and Tyler were already out cold, so Jesse and I decided to call it a night too. I brushed my teeth and went to my room. Before getting into bed, I peeked out the window to get one last look at the ocean. That's when things got way worse. There was someone standing in the sand, right in front of the deck, facing the house. My stomach dropped. It looked like they were staring directly at my window. "Jesse?" I hissed, running to his room. He came out groggily, and I dragged him to my window, but by the time we looked, the person was gone. "I swear, they were just standing there," I told him. He believed me, but wasn't about to go outside to check. I closed the blinds and tried to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still out there. Just as I was about to drift off, there was a knock on my window. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to send a chill through my body. I froze, barely breathing. A few seconds later, there was another knock, lighter this time. I couldn't bring myself to lift the blinds. Instead, I bolted out of my room and woke everyone up, yelling for them to get out of bed. We all checked the window, the deck, and even the sides of the house, but no one was there. Tyler and Nick were confused, so Jesse and I had to explain everything. That night, we kept the backyard lights on. The next morning, Jesse and I went to talk to the neighbors just to see if they'd noticed anything weird. One of them told us something super creepy. About a week ago, someone had knocked on their door late at night, but when they asked who it was, nobody answered. They eventually just ignored it. The rest of the trip was uneventful, but we couldn't stop thinking about it. Even now, I still wonder what I would have seen if I'd opened those blinds. Some mysteries, I think, are better left unsolved. I was 9 years old when this happened, and it's something I'll never forget. For whatever reason, I was home alone that night, just chilling in my room, playing Metroid Prime on my GameCube. I was obsessed with that game back then. My mom never left me alone for long, usually just quick trips to the grocery store or something like that. But there was one strict rule: don't answer the door for anyone. So there I was, fully immersed in the game, when I heard the house phone start ringing downstairs. My mom had always told me to answer it in case she was calling, so I hurried down and grabbed it around the fourth ring. The caller ID showed it was my mom's cell. "Sweetheart, can you come outside and help with the groceries?" she asked. I paused. Something about her voice sounded off. You know your own mom's voice, right? Even as a kid, I could tell something wasn't right. "Mom?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. That voice, it was like hers, but not. It was too soft, too sugary. "Why do you sound like that?" I asked, my stomach starting to churn. "Like what, sweetheart?" I hung up immediately. My mom never called me sweetheart, and definitely not twice in the span of seconds. My heart was racing, and I didn't know why. The phone rang again. Same caller ID, my mom's number. I didn't pick up this time. Something felt seriously wrong. I stayed in the kitchen, clutching the phone, waiting to see if it would ring again. A few minutes later, it did, but this time the number was different. I hesitated, then answered. "Hey, Peter," a man's voice said. "I know this might sound strange, but it's your dad. I'm outside." My blood ran cold. "What?" was all I could manage. "I'm outside. I have a lot to explain," he said calmly. I slammed the phone down. My dad had died when I was 3. I didn't even have memories of him. This confirmed it. Something was seriously wrong. The phone kept ringing, but I ignored it. I wanted to call my mom, but whoever this was clearly had her phone. Then things escalated. There was a knock at the front door. My heart stopped. This wasn't just someone using my mom's phone anymore. Someone was at the house. I crept to the kitchen wall and peeked around toward the door. A man's muffled voice called my name. "Peter, it's your dad. Open up," he said, his voice low but deliberate. He rang the doorbell, then tried the doorknob. That was enough for me. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. The operator was calm and asked me the kind of questions you'd expect. Was I alone? Where was I? I in the house? Could I lock myself somewhere safe? She told me to get into a bathroom or any room with a lock and wait there until the police saw the downstairs bathroom. I ran to the door behind me and flipping off the light. Then I heard it, the sound of someone pulling at a window, the metal scraping as they tried to lift it open. My whole body was shaking. They moved to another window, then another. I could hear their footsteps crunching on the gravel outside as they checked every possible entry. If anything had been unlocked, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. Eventually, it went quiet. I stayed frozen in the bathroom until the 911 operator told me the police were at the front door. She said it was safe to come out. When I opened the door, I was greeted by officers who immediately started checking the house and the yard. They asked me where my mom was, and I told them I thought she was at the store. I also explained that someone had been calling from her phone. My mom came home not long after, pulling into the driveway to the sight of police cars. She was panicked, holding my little sister, and ran straight inside. Turns out her phone had been stolen. It was one of those old Nokia flip phones, and apparently it had our home number and address stored in it. Whoever took it had used it to lure me outside. The creepiest part? The background on her phone was a picture of us. Me, my mom, and my little sister. I think that's how they knew my name. Some sick, twisted couple must have seen the picture and thought they could trick a kid into opening the door. After that night, things changed. My mom never left me alone again, not until I was much older. But even now, years later, the thought of what could have happened still gives me chills. Some people in this world are just terrifying.